Well, friends, it looks like the Trump administration is on quite a roll with these vindictive prosecutions, aren't they? First, James Comey, and now Letitia James. Well, friends, can I tell you something as a career prosecutor? These cases will fail spectacularly. Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, insurance lawyer and Trump flunky Lindsey Halligan has now twice convinced a grand jury to vindictively indict Donald Trump's enemies. First, it was former FBI Director James Comey, and now New York State Attorney General Letitia James. You know, friends, I'm going to be honest. I wouldn't purport to tell Lindsey Halligan how to handle an insurance claim for a fender bender, but she really shouldn't go around pretending that she knows anything about how to properly indict or prosecute a criminal case, because it is abundantly clear she doesn't. Let's start with the new reporting. This from The Guardian. Headline, Letitia James criminally charged in Trump's latest effort to punish rivals. And that article begins, a federal grand jury has indicted Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, for bank fraud and making false statements. 2 charges were brought against James, who had brought a mortgage fraud case against the Trump Organization in 2022 that Trump claimed was a malicious prosecution. Footnote, it wasn't a prosecution at all. It was a civil case in which there was a finding that Trump engaged in massive business fraud. Now, granted, on appeal, the $500 million fine was rejected, but the finding of business fraud by Trump was affirmed. That's all my editorial addition. The article continues. Lindsey Halligan, the US Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, personally presented the case to the grand jury on Thursday. The person said, U.S. attorneys do not typically present to a grand jury. And friends, can I add my own personal experience to that observation that U.S. attorneys don't typically present cases to the grand jury? In my entire career as a federal prosecutor, in the largest United States Attorney's office that we have, the District of Columbia U.S. Attorney's Office, I have never known a United States attorney to go in and present a case to a grand jury for indictment. The article continues, and this quote from Letitia James, this is nothing more than a continuation of the president's desperate weaponization of our justice system. He is forcing federal law enforcement agencies to do his bidding, all because I did my job as the New York State Attorney General, James said in a recorded video statement on Thursday. Quote, these charges are baseless, and the president's own public statements make clear that his only goal is political retribution at any cost. The president's actions are a grave violation of our constitutional order and have drawn sharp criticism from members of both parties. Halligan was installed in the role last month after Donald Trump became frustrated with the pace of the investigations against his rivals. Quote, no one is above the law, Halligan said in a statement. The charges as alleged in this case represent intentional criminal acts and tremendous breaches of the public's trust. The facts and the law in this case are clear, and we will continue to follow them to ensure that justice is served. According to a copy of the federal indictment, James is charged with 1 count of bank fraud and 1 count of making false statements to a financial institution. James' attorney, Abby Lowell, said his client flatly and forcefully denies these charges. James is set to appear in a Virginia court on October 24th. Her attorneys will probably argue that the charges arise from a vindictive and selective prosecution, and there is no material fact to the charges and should be dismissed. Okay, friends, let's take a few minutes to go through the indictment that insurance lawyer Lindsey Halligan somehow convinced a grand jury to vote out against New York State Attorney General Letitia James for this egregious, staggering bank fraud. And I hope you're either sitting down or maybe you have a fainting couch somewhere nearby. Here is what is alleged to have happened based on the indictment. I won't believe any of it until I see actual admissible evidence introduced, in a courtroom, because I'm not taking Lindsey Halligan's word for anything that she put in this indictment. But here is the allegation. Letitia James was looking to purchase a house, a very small, modest house in Norfolk, Virginia. And the house was going for $137,000. And she obtained a mortgage, a loan, in the amount of $109,000, precisely $109,600. And the indictment claims that in the paperwork, her application for the loan, it indicated that she intended to use the house in Norfolk, Virginia as a second residence, but the indictment goes on to allege that eventually she decided to rent it out to a family of 3. So it wasn't being used as a second residence, it was being used as rental property. Friends, here's the kicker. There was a difference in the interest rate between those two kinds of loans, a second residence loan versus a rental property loan. And again, this is where you might want to sit down because we're going to have some fun with numbers. The allegation is that because she got the lower interest rate, claiming it's going to be a second resident, and she should have had the higher interest rate for a rental property loan, she defrauded the bank. You want to hear how much she netted? This is massive fraud. The difference between those two interest rates, those two loans, $52.77 a month. What a hardened criminal Tish James is. She defrauded the bank by getting a slightly more favorable loan so she could steal $52.77 a month. Over the course of what I assume was a 30-year loan, it would have come to a little under $19,000, $52 and change a month. That is the dramatic amount of bank fraud she netted. What a horrific crime that is. Now, first of all, friends, I don't believe she committed a crime. We'll see. The devil's in the evidentiary details. But even assuming everything Lindsey Halligan put in this indictment is true and accurate and provable beyond a reasonable doubt, $52 a month is what Letitia James is alleged to have defrauded the bank out of. Have you ever heard the saying, don't make a federal case out of it? I give you the poster child for that saying. Now, friends, I'm a career prosecutor. I'm a rule of law guy, and fraud is fraud. A misrepresentation on a bank, a loan application is a misrepresentation, and I don't think we should turn a blind eye to it, but never would a federal case be brought for somebody who said, I'm going to use this as my secondary residence, but then ended up renting it out to a family of 3. There may very well be a defense of, I changed my mind down the road. You know, this is the kind of bullshit prosecution, even if everything Lindsey Halligan says is true, that will fail spectacularly in court. We haven't even touched on the vindictive prosecution aspect of it. I mean, think about it. There is probably no other federal bank fraud case that has been brought in the history of the United States court over $52.77 a month. What would that make the prosecution of Letitia James for that amount? A selective prosecution, which is an alternate theory supporting a motion to dismiss the indictment, an alternate theory to vindictive prosecution, but this is also a vindictive prosecution. This will fail spectacularly. And, you know, here is the light amidst the Trump-induced darkness. Every criminal case that he can convince Lindsey Halligan, she's the only one who seems to be willing to do Donald Trump's corrupt and criminal bidding, that he can convince Lindsey Halligan to bring against his enemies, will fail in court, and that will expose Donald Trump as the paper tiger he is, because he can threaten to prosecute his enemies all day long, but guess what? He can't pull it off. That makes him weaker, not stronger. I mean, I've been saying now for the last few weeks that Donald Trump is really not very good at this dictating stuff. He couldn't even keep a comedian off of TV for a week, right? The organizations that at first bent the knee to Donald Trump, Disney, ABC, Sinclair, Nexstar, they agreed to take Jimmy Kimmel off TV, off the air, until they decided there was things more important to them than what the dictator wanted or didn't want. Then they put him right back on air, even though the dictator wanted him kept off TV. You know, Donald Trump gets weaker by the day, not stronger. And friends, when these motions to dismiss based on vindictive prosecution are filed by James Comey and Letitia James, when they are litigated, and when courts throw these cases out, dismiss them likely with prejudice so they can never be rebrought, that will further expose Donald Trump as the sad, pathetic, weak little wannabe dictator that he is, and I believe it will hasten his political demise. Because justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe. Please stay tuned. And I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.